"Daddy, I need to tell you something," Grace said as they ate. "What is it, my daughter?" "I want to make my church bigger. I want to do great things for God, but I need to make some sacrifices." Chief Emeka smiled. "That's good. Sacrifice is part of serving God. What kind of sacrifice?" Grace stood up and walked to her kitchen. She came back with a knife. "Daddy, the sacrifice I need to make, it's you." Chief Emeka looked confused. "Grace, what are you talking about?" "I'm sorry, Daddy, I'm really sorry." Before Chief Emeka could stand up, Grace stabbed him in the chest. He looked at her with shocked eyes. "Grace, my daughter, what have you done?" "I'm building something great, Daddy. Your death will not be wasted." Chief Emeka tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. His last words were, "Grace, I failed you as a father. I should have protected you from this darkness." It was a hot Tuesday morning in Lagos when the phone call came. Inspector James was drinking his tea when his phone rang sharp and loud. "Inspector, you need to come to Victoria Island right now. We found something very bad." The voice on the phone was shaking. Inspector James had heard that kind of fear before. It meant death. It meant horror. It meant the kind of thing that makes grown men cry. "What did you find?" he asked. "Sir, just come. You won't believe me if I tell you on the phone." 1 hour later, Inspector James stood outside the biggest house he had ever seen. The gate was pure gold. The flowers looked like they cost more than his car. Security guards stood everywhere, but they all looked scared. "What happened here?" he asked. Officer Mike, a young policeman with sweat on his face, pointed to the house. "Sir, this is Prophet Grace Adeyezi's house, the one they call the Seeing Eyes. We got a call from her housekeeper this morning." Everyone in Nigeria knew Prophet Grace. She was the woman who saw things before they happened. Presidents from America came to see her. The president of Nigeria visited her every month. CNN called her the most powerful woman in Africa. "So what's the problem?" Inspector James asked. "Sir, the housekeeper found." Officer Mike couldn't finish. "Found what?" "Human heads, sir, fresh ones in her prayer room." Inspector James felt his stomach turn cold. "Whose heads?" "Her husband's head, sir, and her father's, and her mother's, all arranged on her altar like sacrifices." The inspector closed his eyes. He had seen many terrible things in his 20 years as a policeman. But this was different. "Where is Prophet Grace now?" "Inside the house, sir, praying. She won't come out. She says the spirits told her to wait." Let's get back to the beginning of Grace. Grace Adayez was not born to be a prophet. She was born to suffer. When she was 12 years old, her parents died in a car accident on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. She had nowhere to go. No relatives wanted her. She was too old for most people to adopt. But Mama Bridget, an old woman who ran a small church orphanage in Mushin, took her in. The orphanage was not fancy. The roof leaked when it rained. The children shared beds and wore old clothes. But it was there that Grace met her 4 best friends, Ruth, Mary, Esther, and Deborah. They were all orphans too. They had all lost everything. The 5 girls became like sisters. They did everything together. They prayed together every morning at 5 a.m. They studied the Bible together. They dreamed of becoming great women of God. At night, when the other children were sleeping, the 5 girls would sneak out to the small chapel behind the orphanage. They would hold hands and pray. "God," Grace would whisper, "let us serve you with power. Let us do great things for your kingdom." One night when Grace was 15, something strange happened. As they were praying, Grace suddenly started shaking. Her eyes rolled back until only the white parts showed. Her voice changed. "Ruth will sing for kings," she said in a voice that didn't sound like hers. "Mary will feed 10,000 orphans. Esther will write books that change minds. Deborah will plant churches in 20 countries." Then Grace collapsed. When she woke up, her friends were staring at her with wide eyes. "Grace, what just happened?" Ruth asked. I don't know. I saw things. I saw all of you doing great things for God." From that night, Grace began to see things. She would have dreams about people dying. She would wake up and tell Mama Bridget, the man who sells bread on the corner will have an accident today. And it would happen. She saw when politicians would win elections. She saw when rain would come. She saw when people would get sick. At first, Mama Bridget was happy. God has given you a gift, child, she said. Use it to help people. But Grace wanted more than just helping people. She wanted to be great. She wanted to be powerful. She wanted people to know her name. When Grace turned 18, all 5 girls got scholarships to attend Victory Bible Seminary in Jos. They were so excited. They thought God was opening doors for them. The seminary was beautiful. Big buildings, green grass, libraries full of books. The girls shared a room and studied hard. But Grace was different from her friends. While Ruth practiced singing and Mary learned about helping the poor, Grace spent hours reading about prophets in the Bible. She read about Elijah calling fire from heaven. She read about Elisha raising the dead. She read about Samuel hearing God's voice as a child. I want that kind of power, she told her friends one night. Grace, power is not the most important thing, Esther said. Love is more important. Easy for you to say, Grace replied. People don't listen to love, they listen to power. In their final year at seminary, the 5 friends made a promise. They cut their hands with a small knife and mixed their blood together. We promise never to let success divide us, Grace said as their blood dripped into a cup. We promise to always be sisters no matter how big God makes us. They all agreed. They prayed together and promised to meet every year, no matter where they were in the world. After seminary, the girls went different ways. Ruth got married and started singing in big churches. Mary opened an orphanage in Abuja. Esther became a professor and started writing books about God. Deborah went to America and started planting churches. But Grace went home to Lagos and started a small church in a 1-room building in Alaba Market. Grace's church was called Divine Vision Ministries. She painted the name on a small wooden sign and hung it outside the door. On her first Sunday, only 7 people came. Old women who had nothing else to do, and young men who wanted free food after the service. Grace preached about the power of God. She prayed for the sick. She prophesied about people's futures. But nothing happened. No miracles, no healing, no crowds. For 3 years, her church stayed small. Sometimes only 5 people came on Sunday. Sometimes nobody came at all. Grace would sit in the empty church and cry. She would call her seminary friends and hear about their success. Ruth was now singing for governors and kings. Her music videos had millions of views on YouTube. Mary's orphanage had grown to house 500 children. Foreign governments gave her money to help more children. Esther had written 5 books about Christianity. Universities invited her to speak all over the world. Deborah had planted 50 churches in America. American pastors called her the Nigerian angel. But Grace had 7 members on a good Sunday. One night she was praying alone in her church when she heard a voice. "Why are you struggling, Grace?" She looked around. Nobody was there. "You want power," the voice said. "Real power. The kind that makes people travel from far places just to see you." "Yes," Grace whispered. "I want to serve God with power." "God gave you a small gift," the voice said, "but I can give you something bigger, something that will make presidents bow before you." Grace's heart started beating fast. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing much. Just prove that you want power more than anything else." "How?" "Feed me. Not with goats or cows. Feed me with love. Feed me with the blood of those who love you most." Grace stepped back. "No, that's evil," the voice laughed. "Evil? You think Elijah's sacrifice was evil? You think David's wars were evil? Great power requires great sacrifice." That night, Grace didn't sleep. She thought about her empty church. She thought about her friend's success. She thought about the voice. Then came the first sacrifice. Grace's father was Chief Emeka Okoro. He wasn't her real father, but he had adopted her when she was 21 and struggling to start her church. Chief Emeka was a good man. He sold car parts in Alaba Market and made enough money to help Grace pay her church rent. Every Sunday, he would come to her church and sit in the front row, even when nobody else came. "My daughter," he would say, God's time is the best time, don't rush. But Grace was tired of waiting. One evening, Chief Emeka came to visit Grace in her small flat behind the church. He brought rice and chicken. "Daddy, I need to tell you something," Grace said as they ate. "What is it, my daughter?" "I want to make my church bigger. I want to do great things for God. But I need to make some sacrifices." Chief Emeka smiled. "That's good. Sacrifice is part of serving God. What kind of sacrifice?" Grace stood up and walked to her kitchen. She came back with a knife. "Daddy, the sacrifice I need to make, it's you." Chief Emeka looked confused. "Grace, what are you talking about?" "I'm sorry, Daddy, I'm really sorry." Before Chief Emeka could stand up, Grace stabbed him in the chest. He looked at her with shocked eyes. "Grace, my daughter, what have you done?" "I'm building something great, Daddy. Your death will not be wasted." Chief Emeka tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. His last words were, "Grace, I failed you as a father. I should have protected you from this darkness." That night, Grace cut off her father's head and took it to her church. She placed it on the altar and prayed. "I give you the blood of love," she whispered. "Now give me power." The next Sunday, something incredible happened. There came the miracle explosion. The church was packed. Word had spread that Prophet Grace had received a new anointing. People came from everywhere. Grace stood on the small stage and raised her hands. As she prayed, her eyes changed color. They went from brown to gold to pure black. "I see a woman here," she said, her voice deeper than usual. "You have been barren for 8 years. You have been to every hospital. But I see twins in your future, twins that will be born in 9 months." A woman in the crowd screamed and fell down. "That's me! That's exactly me!" Grace pointed to a man in the back. "You, sir, you have been unemployed for 2 years, but I see you working in a bank before this year ends. You will wear a suit and carry a briefcase." The man started crying. "It's true. It's all true." For 2 hours, Grace prophesied. Everything she said was specific, detailed, and personal. People fell down crying. Others ran around the church shouting, "Thank you, Jesus!" But Grace knew the truth. The voice in her head was telling her all these things, the same voice that had asked for her father's blood. After that Sunday, Grace's church exploded with growth. People came from Lagos Island, from Ogun State, from Abuja. They brought friends and family members. Within 6 months, Grace had to rent a bigger building. Within a year, she was building her own church, a massive structure that could hold 5,000 people. The barren woman gave birth to twins exactly 9 months later. The unemployed man got a job at First Bank 3 months later. Every prophecy Grace made came true. News reporters came to interview her. CNN called her Nigeria's most accurate prophet. BBC did a documentary about her gift. Time magazine put her on their cover as one of the most influential people in Africa. But Grace's success came with a price. The voice was hungry for more. This time was the mother. Grace's mother was Mrs. Helen Okoro, Chief Emeka's wife. She had loved Grace like her own daughter since the adoption. When Chief Emeka disappeared, Mrs. Helen came to live with Grace. "I need to be close to you," she said. "You're all I have left." Mrs. Helen was a prayer warrior. She would wake up at 4 a.m. every day and pray for 3 hours. She would fast twice a week. She was the kind of woman who could pray and make things happen. One night, Mrs. Helen was praying in Grace's house when she heard strange sounds coming from the prayer room. She quietly walked to the room and peeked through the keyhole. Inside, she saw Grace kneeling before an altar she had never seen before. On the altar was a bowl filled with blood. Next to the bowl was something that made her heart stop. Her husband's head, which Grace had preserved. Mrs. Helen almost screamed, but she covered her mouth with her hand. She watched as Grace poured the blood on the head and spoke in a language she didn't understand. That night, Mrs. Helen couldn't sleep. She knew what she had seen was evil, but Grace was her daughter, and Helen doubted if that was actually the head of her husband. She chose to not conclude yet. How could her daughter, the woman who prayed so beautifully, the woman who helped so many people, be doing such terrible things? The next morning, Mrs. Helen confronted Grace. "Grace, sit down, we need to talk." "What is it, Mama?" "Last night I saw something in your prayer room. I saw Emeka's head, or was it a sculpture?" Grace's face went cold. "Mama, you were dreaming. You saw nothing close to that." Mrs. Helen stood up and walked to Grace. She put her hands on Grace's shoulders. "My daughter, whatever darkness you have entered, we can fix it. We can pray together. We can fast together. God can deliver you from anything." Grace looked into her mother's eyes. This woman had loved her when nobody else would. This woman had cooked for her, prayed for her, sacrificed for her. But the voice was getting stronger. "She knows too much," the voice whispered in Grace's head. "She will destroy everything you have built. She will expose you." "No," Grace whispered. "Grace, what did you say?" Mrs. Helen asked. "I said no, Mama. I can't let you destroy what I've built." Before Mrs. Helen could react, Grace grabbed a heavy vase from the table and hit her mother on the head. Mrs. Helen fell to the ground, blood flowing from her head. She looked up at Grace with tears in her eyes. "Grace, the daughter, what have you become?" "I'm what I need to be, Mama. I'm powerful." Mrs. Helen tried to crawl away, but Grace hit her again and again until she stopped moving. That night, Grace cut off her mother's head and added it to her altar. The next Sunday, Grace's prophecies were even more powerful. She prophesied to a visiting senator and told him exactly which laws he would pass in the coming year. She prophesied to a businessman and told him which stocks to buy. People called her the Seeing Eyes because she could see things that nobody else could see. Then came the international recognition. By 2018, Grace had become an international sensation. Presidents from Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa flew to Lagos just to consult with her. When Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, Grace prophesied that he would win despite what the polls said. She was right. When COVID-19 started, Grace prophesied in January 2020 that a great sickness would cover the earth for 2 years. She was right. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Grace had prophesied it 6 months earlier during a service that was broadcast live on television. World leaders started calling her the Oracle of Lagos. The United Nations invited her to speak about global conflicts. Harvard University gave her an honorary doctorate. Grace bought a private jet. She built a mansion in Banana Island that cost $50 million. She started a television network that broadcast to 60 countries. Her seminary friends watched her success with mixed feelings. Ruth came to visit her one day. "Grace, we're so proud of you, but we miss the old you. You seem different." "Different how?" Grace asked. "Colder, harder. You used to laugh with us. Now you only talk about power and influence." Grace smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Ruth, when you're as powerful as I am, you can't be soft. The world doesn't respect soft people." Mary also visited. "Grace, remember our promise? Remember the blood pact we made? We said we would never let success divide us." "I remember," Grace said. "But I also remember being poor and ignored while you all became successful. Now it's my turn." Esther and Deborah tried to organize a reunion of all 5 friends, but Grace was always too busy. She was traveling to meet with world leaders, appearing on international television, or hosting powerful people in her mansion. The 4 friends started to worry. They would video call each other and talk about Grace. "Something is wrong with her," Deborah said during one call. "I had a dream about her, and in the dream, she was covered in blood." "Maybe we should pray for her," Mary suggested. "We've been praying," Esther replied, "but she won't let us get close to her anymore." They didn't know that Grace could see their conversations. The spirits had given her the power to see anything she wanted to see. She watched them through their phone cameras. She heard their worried discussions, and she was planning her next move. But she could not be distracted because she had a wedding to plan. Grace married Pastor David Adaiz in 2019. David was a simple pastor who ran a small church in Ikorodu. He was kind, gentle, and truly loved God. When Grace became famous, David was happy for her. He supported her ministry and even closed his own church to help her full-time. "I'm proud of my wife," he would tell people. "God has used her in a mighty way." David and Grace had twin daughters, Faith and Hope. They were born in 2020, beautiful little girls who looked exactly like their mother. David was a good father. He would wake up early to make breakfast for the girls. He would read them Bible stories before bed. He would pray over them every night. But David started noticing strange things about his wife. Grace would disappear for hours and come back smelling like blood. She claimed she had been fasting and praying, but David had never known fasting to make someone smell like a butcher shop. Grace had built a private prayer room in their mansion that she kept locked. She told David that it was her holy place where she met with God, and nobody else was allowed inside. But sometimes, late at night, David would hear strange sounds coming from the room, chanting in languages he didn't recognize, sometimes what sounded like crying or screaming. One night in 2022, David's curiosity got the better of him. While Grace was traveling to meet with the president of Ghana, David decided to break into the prayer room. What he found made him vomit immediately. The room looked like something from a horror movie. The walls were painted red with what looked like blood. In the center of the room was an altar made of black stone. On the altar were 3 human heads in glass cases. David recognized them immediately. Grace's father and mother, who Grace claimed were traveling abroad, and a third head he didn't recognize. Next to the heads were bowls filled with dried blood. There were knives, candles, and books written in strange symbols. David fell to his knees and started crying. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, was a murderer. When Grace returned from Ghana the next day, David was waiting for her in the living room with a suitcase. "Grace, we need to talk." "David, what's wrong? Why do you look so serious?" "I went into your prayer room." Grace's face changed instantly. The love in her eyes disappeared and was replaced by something cold and dangerous. "You had no right to go in there." "Grace, whose heads are those? Where are your parents? What have you done?" David stood up and walked to her. "Grace, I love you, but I cannot let you continue this madness. Think about our daughters. Think about faith and hope. What kind of mother are you?" Grace stood up slowly. "I'm the kind of mother who can give her children everything: power, wealth, influence. Our daughters will never struggle like I struggled. Grace, our daughters need a mother who loves God, not a mother who serves demons." "Don't you dare judge me," Grace shouted. "You were a nobody when I married you. A small pastor with a small church and small dreams. I made you somebody. I was happy being a nobody if it meant having a wife who loved God." David picked up his suitcase. "Grace, I'm taking the girls and leaving. If you want your family back, you need to repent. Destroy that altar. Ask God for forgiveness. Come back to the light." Grace laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. "David, you're not taking my daughters anywhere." "Yes, I am. I won't let you turn them into whatever you've become." That night, David packed the girls' clothes and planned to leave the next morning. He called his brother and asked him to come help move them to a safe place. But David never got the chance to leave. That night, Grace prepared David's favorite meal, pounded yam and egusi soup. She called him to the dining room and served him herself. "David, my love," she said, smiling sweetly, "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have gone too far." David looked surprised. "Really, you mean it?" "Yes, I want to be a better wife and mother. I want to serve God the right way." David smiled. "Grace, I'm so happy to hear that. I knew the woman I married was still in there somewhere." They ate dinner together, talking and laughing like they used to. Grace seemed like her old self, warm, loving, funny. After dinner, Grace suggested they pray together as a family. She called Faith and Hope to join them in the living room. "Daddy, Mummy says we're going to pray together," Faith said, excited. At 4 years old, she loved family prayer time. "Yes, my princess," David said, lifting her onto his lap. "We're going to thank God for our family." Grace brought out a special bottle of wine. "This is holy wine," she said. "We'll drink it together as we pray, like communion." David was suspicious for a moment. Grace rarely drank wine, and she had never suggested communion at home before. "Grace, where did you get this wine?" "From the church supply room," Pastor Williams gave it to me." David relaxed. Pastor Williams was an old family friend and a respected minister. Grace poured 4 small cups, one for each of them, including small sips for the girls. "Let's drink together and ask God to bless our family," Grace said. They all drank the wine. It tasted bitter, but Grace said that was normal for communion wine. Within minutes, David started feeling dizzy. "Grace, I don't feel well." "Just rest, my love. The wine is strong." But David's condition got worse quickly. He started having trouble breathing. His vision became blurry. "Grace, what was in that wine?" Grace's warm smile disappeared. "Something to help you sleep forever, my love." David tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't work. He fell to the floor, struggling to breathe. "Grace, the girls. Please don't hurt the girls." Faith and Hope were also getting sick, but they were smaller, so the poison was working faster. "Mummy, I don't feel good," Hope whispered, tears in her eyes. "It's okay, baby," Grace said, holding her daughter. "You're going to sleep, and when you wake up, you'll be with Jesus." David used his last strength to crawl toward his daughters. "Faith, Hope, Daddy loves you so much." But before he could reach them, the poison stopped his heart. Grace watched her husband die. She watched her daughters die, and she felt nothing. That night, she cut off all 3 heads and added them to her altar. The next morning, Grace called her assistant. "Cancel all my appointments for the next few days. My family has traveled to America for vacation." For 2 years, Grace continued her ministry. She told people her family was living in America while she handled her international ministry commitments. Her prophecies became even more accurate and more powerful. She prophesied the results of elections in 5 different countries. She prophesied natural disasters months before they happened. She prophesied the rise and fall of world leaders with perfect accuracy. Presidents and prime ministers competed to book appointments with her. She charged $100,000 for a private prophecy session, and world leaders paid without question. Grace built a second mansion in Abuja. She bought houses in London, Dubai, and New York. Forbes listed her as one of the richest women in Africa. But success came with a price. The spirits demanded more and more blood. Grace started killing her domestic staff, her drivers, anyone who got too close to discovering her secret. She told people they'd been transferred to other positions or returned to their villages. Her seminary friends became more and more worried. They hadn't seen David or the girls in 2 years, and Grace's explanations didn't make sense. "Why haven't we seen any pictures of Faith and Hope?" Ruth asked during a video call. "They're focused on their studies," Grace replied. "American schools are very demanding." "Grace, they're 6 years old," Mary said. "What kind of studies?" "Advanced studies. My daughters are very intelligent." Esther, who had always been the smartest of the group, started investigating. She called contacts in America, trying to find records of David and the girls. She found nothing. No school enrollment, no immigration records, no trace of them anywhere. One night, Esther called the other 3 friends for an emergency meeting. "I think something terrible has happened to David and the girls," she said. "What do you mean?" Deborah asked. "I've been investigating for months. There's no record of them in America, no record of them anywhere." The 4 friends decided to confront Grace together. They flew to Lagos and showed up at her mansion unannounced. "Grace, we need to talk," Ruth said when Grace came to the door. "This is not a good time," Grace replied. "I'm preparing for a prophecy session with the vice president." "Grace, we're not leaving until you tell us the truth about David and the girls," Mary said firmly. Grace let them into her mansion, but she led them to the guest living room, not the main one where her family used to gather. "Where are David, Faith, and Hope?" Esther asked directly. "I told you, they're in America." "Grace, we've investigated," Deborah said. "There's no record of them anywhere. What really happened to your family?" Grace stared at her 4 friends, the sisters she had grown up with, the women who had shared her dreams and struggles. For a moment, her hard expression softened. For a moment, she looked like the young girl they had prayed with in the orphanage. "You really want to know?" she asked quietly. "Yes," all 4 said together. Grace walked to the window and looked out at her gardens. They tried to stop me. David found my prayer room and threatened to expose me. He wanted to take my daughters away from me. So what did you do? Ruth asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Grace turned around, and her friends saw something in her eyes that made them step back. I gave them to the spirits, just like I gave my parents, just like I gave everyone who tried to stop me from becoming great. The room went completely silent. Mary started crying first, then Ruth, then Deborah. Esther just stared at Grace with shock and horror. Grace, Mary whispered, what have you become? I became what I needed to become. I became powerful. You became a monster, Esther said. Grace smiled that cold smile. Maybe, but I'm a powerful monster, and now you four know too much. The friends realized they were in danger. They started moving toward the door, but Grace was faster. She pressed a button on her phone. Security, lock all the doors. We have intruders. Grace, we're not intruders, Ruth said. We're your sisters. You stopped being my sisters when you chose to judge me instead of support me. But God was watching over the four friends that day. Before Grace's security could lock all the doors, Deborah managed to escape, and she did not waste any time in calling the police. The police arrived at Grace's mansion just as she was preparing to kill her remaining friends. Inspector James led the team that broke down Grace's door. They found Ruth, Mary, and Esther tied up in the basement, crying and praying. Where is Prophet Grace? Inspector James asked. In her prayer room, Ruth sobbed. She's performing some kind of ritual. The police broke down the prayer room door and found a sight that would haunt them forever. Grace was kneeling before her altar, covered in blood. Around her were the heads of 7 people, her parents, her husband, her daughters, and 3 domestic workers. She was chanting in a strange language, and her eyes had turned completely black. Prophet Grace, you're under arrest, Inspector James said, though his voice was shaking. Grace looked up at him and smiled. Arrest me for what? For becoming everything God wanted me to become? For murder? Multiple murders? Grace laughed. I didn't murder anyone. I made sacrifices. Just like Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac. Just like Jesus was sacrificed for the world. As the police handcuffed her, Grace's phone started ringing. It was the president of Nigeria, calling for his scheduled prophecy session. Aren't you going to answer that? Grace asked the police. The president is waiting for his prophecy. Inspector James answered the phone. Mr. President, this is Inspector James. Prophet Grace has been arrested for murder. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for almost a minute. What kind of murder? The president finally asked. She killed her family, sir. Her husband, her daughters, her parents. We found their heads in her prayer room. The president hung up immediately. Within hours, the news of Grace's arrest spread around the world. CNN broke the story first. Nigeria's famous prophet arrested for multiple murders. BBC followed with The Seeing Eyes, how a beloved prophet became a serial killer. The story was front-page news in every major newspaper. Social media exploded with shock, disbelief, and horror. World leaders who had consulted with Grace were embarrassed and angry. The president of Ghana, who had just met with her the week before, held a press conference. I'm shocked and disgusted by these revelations, he said. I want to assure the people of Ghana that we will be reviewing all decisions made based on her prophecies. The president of Nigeria was even more direct. I feel betrayed and foolish. This woman sat in my office and gave me advice about running our country. Now I discover she was a cold-blooded killer. But the most heartbreaking reactions came from ordinary people who had believed in Grace. Mrs. Aduni, the woman whose twins were the first miracle in Grace's ministry, appeared on television crying. She prophesied the birth of my children, she sobbed. My twins are 8 years old now. Were they born because of demon power? Are my children cursed? Thousands of people who had received prophecies from Grace were asking the same question. Were their blessings real, or were they cursed? Churches across Nigeria held special prayer meetings to break any evil covenants people might have with Grace through her prophecies. Grace's television network was shut down immediately. Her books were pulled from stores. Her massive church building was sealed by the government. The most painful reactions came from Grace's seminary friends. They held a joint press conference 3 days after Grace's arrest. All 4 women sat at a table, their eyes red from crying. Ruth spoke first. "We knew Grace when she was pure. We knew her when she loved God with all her heart. The woman who was arrested is not the Grace we grew up with." Mary was barely able to speak through her tears. "Grace held my babies. She prayed over my children. She called them her nieces and nephews. How can someone who loved children so much, how can she kill her own daughters?" Esther, usually the most composed, broke down completely. "We made a blood pact as teenagers to never let success divide us, but we never imagined that Grace would actually shed blood for success. Real blood, innocent blood." Deborah's words hit the hardest. To all the children in Sunday schools who were taught to pray like Auntie Grace, to all the young girls who wanted to be like her, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We didn't know we were promoting a monster. After the press conference, all 4 women announced they were taking breaks from ministry. Ruth stopped singing. Mary closed her orphanages temporarily. Esther stopped writing and teaching. Deborah suspended all her church planting activities. "How can we continue to tell people about God's love?" Ruth said in a private interview, "when someone we loved and trusted used God's name to commit such evil?" Grace was held in Kirikiri maximum security prison while awaiting trial. She was kept in isolation because other prisoners threatened to kill her when they learned what she had done. For the first month, Grace refused to speak to anyone, not to lawyers, not to psychologists, not to police investigators. She would sit in her cell staring at the wall, sometimes talking to herself in languages nobody understood. But one day, Inspector James visited her with a psychologist, Dr. Adebayo, who specialized in criminal behavior. "Grace," Dr. Adebayo said gently, "we want to understand what happened to you. Help us understand." For the first time in a month, Grace looked up and made eye contact. "You want to understand?" she asked, her voice hoarse from not speaking. "Yes." Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she started talking, and once she started, she couldn't stop. "I just wanted to serve God with power," she said, tears falling from her eyes for the first time since her arrest. "When I was young, I could see small things, when someone would get sick, when it would rain. But it wasn't enough. People didn't respect small prophecies." Dr. Adebayo leaned forward. "When did it change?" Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "There was a man. They called him Brother Fire. I found him after my brothers rejected me, after my church stayed empty for 3 years. He told me the spirits could give me real power, the kind that makes presidents fly across oceans just to hear your words." "What did he ask for in return?" Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. "Blood. Not just any blood. The blood of love. He said the spirits only accepted sacrifices that truly hurt your heart." Inspector James, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Why didn't you stop after the first one?" Grace looked at him with eyes that seemed much older than her years. "Because it worked. After I killed Papa Emeka, my church exploded overnight. People came from everywhere. My prophecies became so accurate that world leaders started calling me. I told myself it was worth it, 1 life for thousands of souls saved. But you didn't stop at 1. The spirit, they're never satisfied. They kept demanding more. Mama Helen found out, so she had to die. David threatened to expose me, so he had to die. And my daughters." Grace's voice broke completely. Grace buried her face in her hands. "They trusted me completely. Even as I gave them the poisoned wine, they smiled at me. Hope's last words were, 'Mummy, I love you.'" The room fell silent, except for Grace's sobs. "Grace," Dr. Adebayo said softly, "do you understand what you've done?" Grace looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I built an empire on graves. I told myself I was serving God, but I was serving demons. Every miracle I performed, every accurate prophecy, every life I changed for the better, it all came from the blood of people who loved me." Grace's trial began 6 months later and became the most watched criminal proceeding in Nigerian history. International media covered every detail. The courtroom was packed daily with journalists, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens seeking answers. Grace's lawyer, Chief Adebola Williams, attempted an insanity defense, but Grace refused to cooperate. "I knew exactly what I was doing," she told the court during her testimony. "I was sane when I killed my father. I was sane when I killed my mother. I was sane when I poisoned my husband and daughters. Don't give me the mercy of madness." The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. DNA samples, video footage from security cameras, testimony from her surviving domestic staff who had witnessed strange rituals. But the most damaging testimony came from Grace herself. "Your Honor," she said, standing in the dock, "I want to read something." She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "This is a letter I received 3 days ago in prison. It's from a little girl named Faith Okafor. She was named after my daughter." Grace's voice trembled as she read. "Dear Auntie Grace, my mummy says you used to be a woman of God. You told her I would become a doctor when I was just 2 years old. I'm in primary 4 now, and I still want to be a doctor. But my mummy cries when she talks about you now. She says you killed your own children. Did your prophecy about me come from God or from the devil? Should I still want to be a doctor? I don't know what's real anymore. Faith." Grace folded the letter and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, this little girl represents thousands of people whose faith I've poisoned. I don't deserve mercy. I deserve whatever punishment will begin to balance the scales." The judge, Justice Adebola Okoye, sentenced Grace to death by hanging for 7 counts of first-degree murder. As the sentence was read, Grace stood silently. No tears, no protests, no pleas for mercy. "Do you have anything to say?" Justice Okoye asked. Grace nodded. "I have a message for every person watching this trial. Every person who ever believed in my prophecies." She turned to face the packed courtroom and the television cameras. "Test every spirit. Not every miracle comes from God. Not every prophecy is holy. I stood before you in white robes, quoted scriptures and performed wonders, but my hands were stained with the blood of my own family. The devil can work miracles too. Don't be deceived like I was. Don't let ambition for power turn you into what I became." 2 weeks before her scheduled execution, Grace wrote a final letter that was published in newspapers across Nigeria. "To anyone who will listen, my name is Grace Adayes, though I know many of you called me the Seeing Eyes or God's Oracle. I'm writing this from death row, days before I will face the consequences of my actions. I want to tell you about the last conversation I had with my daughter Hope. It was the night I poisoned them. After David had collapsed and Faith was getting drowsy, Hope climbed into my lap. She was struggling to keep her eyes open, but she looked at me with such love. 'Mommy,' she whispered, 'when I get to heaven, will Jesus tell me why Daddy had to sleep so long?' I told her that Jesus would explain everything, that she would understand when she saw him. 'Will you come to heaven too, Mommy?' she asked. I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell your daughter that you're sending her to heaven while you're headed somewhere much darker? 'I hope so, baby,' I lied. Hope smiled and closed her eyes for the last time. 'I'll wait for you, Mummy. I'll tell Jesus you're a good mummy who reads us Bible stories.' Those were her final words. She died believing I was good. I'm writing this letter because I want every parent reading this to understand. No amount of power, no amount of success, no amount of fame is worth becoming someone your children would fear if they truly knew you. I wanted to be great. I wanted people to know my name. I wanted presidents to seek my counsel and crowds to worship at my feet. But greatness without goodness is just destruction dressed in beautiful clothes. To the seminary sisters who loved me, Ruth, Mary, Esther, and Deborah, I know you blame yourselves for not stopping me. Don't. The choices I made were mine alone. You loved me as sisters should. I loved power more than I loved you. To every person who received a prophecy from me, who was healed in my services, who found hope through my ministry, I don't know if your blessings were real or if they came from the same dark source that gave me my power. But I know this. God is real, and he can work through broken vessels. Don't let my evil make you doubt his goodness. to the little girl named Faith who wrote to me, "Become a doctor, child. Heal people. Save lives. Be everything I pretended to be but never was. I go to my death knowing that my daughters are in heaven, free from the monster their mother became. I pray that's the only mercy I'll receive. May my story serve as a warning. Not everyone who speaks in God's name speaks for God." Grace Adeyeza, Death Row, Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. Grace was executed by hanging on a rainy Thursday morning, exactly 2 years after her arrest. She declined the traditional last meal and spent her final hours reading her Bible. Her last words, spoken to the prison chaplain, were, "Tell my daughters I'm sorry. Tell them their mother died hoping for forgiveness she doesn't deserve." Only 5 people witnessed her execution: the required officials, the prison chaplain, and Inspector James, who had requested to be present. As the hood was placed over her head, Grace whispered something that only the chaplain could hear. "I see them now. I see faith and hope. They're beautiful." Those were her final words. Grace's death marked the end of the most shocking religious scandal in Nigerian history, but its effects continued to ripple through society. Her massive church building remained empty for 3 years before being converted into a hospital. A fitting transformation, many said, from a place of false miracles to a place of real healing. The seminary sisters eventually returned to ministry, but their approach had changed forever. They started an organization called Test the Spirits that taught people how to discern true spiritual gifts from false ones. Ruth's testimony became particularly powerful. "Grace was my sister, and I loved her. But love isn't enough if it makes you blind to evil. We must love people enough to hold them accountable." Mrs. Aduni, the woman whose twins had been Grace's first public miracle, struggled for years with questions about her children's legitimacy. She eventually found peace through counseling and decided, "My children are blessings from God, regardless of the vessel He used to prophesy their birth. Grace's evil doesn't diminish God's goodness." The house where Grace killed her family was demolished. In its place, the Lagos state government built a memorial garden with a simple plaque. "In memory of Faith and Hope Adeyeza, innocent victims of ambition without conscience." 5 years after Grace's execution, a documentary filmmaker interviewed some of the people most affected by her story. The most powerful interview was with Mama Bridget, the elderly woman who had raised Grace in the orphanage. Now in her 80s, she sat under the same mango tree where she used to teach young Grace to pray. "People ask me if I blame myself," Mama Bridget said, her voice still strong despite her age. "They ask if I failed Grace somehow." She paused, looking at the spot where Grace used to sit as a child. "I taught Grace to pray. I taught her to read the Bible. I taught her to love God. But I couldn't teach her to be content with being ordinary. She wanted to be special so badly that she was willing to become a monster." The interviewer asked, "What would you say to Grace if she were here now?" Mama Bridget was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, tears filled her eyes. "I would tell her that she was already special. She was special when she was just a little orphan girl who helped me feed the other children. She was special when she prayed with her friends in that small chapel. She was special before any of the power, before any of the fame." She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. Grace thought she needed to be great to matter, but we all matter to God just as we are. The tragedy is that she never learned that simple truth. As the documentary ended, the screen displayed a final message. "In memory of Chief Emeka Okoro, Mrs. Helen Okoro, Pastor David Adeyez, Faith Adeyez, Hope Adeyez, and the other victims of Grace Adeyeza's quest for power. May their deaths remind us that the greatest spiritual gift is not the power to prophesy or perform miracles, but the wisdom to love what is good and reject what is evil, no matter the cost. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Mark 8:36. And so ended the story of Grace Adeyez, the seeing eyes. A woman who could see everyone's future except her own tragic end, who gained the whole world but lost everything that mattered, who became the very evil she once prayed against. Her name became a warning whispered in churches across Africa, Don't let ambition make you into another Grace Adoyes. The seeing eyes that once gazed into the futures of presidents and kings were forever closed, leaving behind only questions, grief, and the hope that others would learn from her fall into darkness. The end. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. Thank you, and remember, we love you.